Hey everyone, welcome back to the OrtoTech Garage. My name is Keith. Today I've got with me this Toyota Camry. I want to teach you all the ins and outs of changing the transmission fluid on this vehicle. It is a complicated procedure. There's no dipstick tube, there's no way to fill this from the top, and it's a little bit tricky if you don't know the steps. So I'm going to bring all that information to you here in this video and give you some confidence here to change your own fluid. This is not completely unique to a Toyota only. A lot of the manufacturers are going to this method where they have what they consider a sealed unit or a lifetime fluid or all these things. That's completely nonsense. You still want to service the fluid on your transmission from time to time. This is how you're going to get the longest life out of it and keep your car properly maintained. So let me show you all the steps on this particular car and let's get right into it. Before we get started, I just want to show you some of the tools and materials we need. I've got here a couple of new drain plug and fill plug gaskets. They're the same part here. A couple of sockets. These are some Allen drive or hex head sockets in a 6 and 10 millimeter, 21 millimeter for the wheel to take that off. A little can of brake clean, we're going to need that. We're going to make a little mess while we do this. I've got a flathead screwdriver. We can use that to remove all the clips on the covers and swap out your drain plug gasket. I've also got a 24 millimeter socket here, and it's on a 1/2-inch breaker bar. That should get us inside the wheel to take the fill plug out. A couple of ratchets here, 3/8 drive and a torque wrench in 3/8 drive so we can torque down the drain plug. And also I've got my little Makita tool here with a 10 millimeter socket on it and extension so we can get all the bolts off the covers. Got a 1/2-inch drive gun here. We can take the wheels off and the socket will go with that. And I've got this tool here that's dripping on me, and we're going to use that to fill the transmission up. This is how we're going to get the fluid pumped up into the hole in the side of the fender here. And we've got 6 quarts of Toyota WS fluid. I don't think we'll need it all, but we've got enough there if we need some extra. All right, so here's what's unique about this car. We pop the hood. We want to check the transmission fluid. We want to fill the transmission fluid. None of that's happening from under here. We can't access anything. You can just forget about it. Just close the hood. We're going underneath. I'm starting here at the left front wheel of the car. This is driver's side front wheel. I've got the wheel turned out. If you're doing this at home, this is probably how you'll do this. It is easier if you take the wheel off, and certainly for this filming process here, I'm going to take the wheel off so you guys have good access to see what's going on in here. Let's go ahead and get the wheel off of this, and then I'm going to show you where the cover is. We'll remove the cover, and I want to show you where the fill plug is. That's what we're trying to access right now. This is how you're going to fill the transmission fluid on this particular car. All right, so if you come on in here, there's a cover here. It's got a couple of bolts that hold it on, and there's a couple of clips that'll have to be removed, and we need to take this out of the way, and I'll show you where that fill plug is. So I just want to remove this little pop clip. We'll take this out completely. This is going to free up the corner of that. And I've also got a couple of screws here, 10 millimeter. And then this access cover comes off. Then right here, if you come in low, you'll see there is a large bolt here that is the fill plug. So we're going to pop that out and give us access to fill this transmission. All right, I've got a 24 millimeter socket here on a breaker bar. It's not very tight, so you just want to pop it loose, and then it should spin out by hand. I know it's a large head on here, but it's not extremely tight. And you probably need a breaker bar instead of a ratchet. There's not a lot of clearance in there, but this is what the fill plug looks like. We're going to remove the 4 bolts along the front here. There's an access hole in the forward cover for you to get to one of the bolts here. This front cover also covers up a portion of this middle bolts on here. And what I usually do is I'll just kind of pry them down. So if you pry it down, you can get access to them without taking the front cover off. These you can remove through the holes. This one here as well. I'm just prying the corner of that front cover down. And then one more bolt over here, and those will come out. And then all we have to do is remove the clips from around the perimeter here. So just using a screwdriver, pop the center out and then pull them down. All right, with all the clips removed, this cover will come down in the back and then just slide towards the back of the car. And if you look here, you'll notice on this cover, we didn't remove this portion here. This covers the drain plug and the oil filter, and that doesn't have to come off in order to get this entire cover off. With that out of the way, we can use a 10mm Allen socket right here in the drain bolt. We're gonna go ahead and pop that loose and then we'll take it out. All right, so now inside this hole, there is a smaller hexagonal socket needed that goes into the fluid check tube. So we're gonna take that out. This is the only way you can drain the fluid. We've got to get this tube out. It's not very tight, it's a small little plastic tube, but we've got to get it out completely in order to get the fluid out. And we're gonna do this kind of like you do an oil change. We're gonna get it as close as we can. We're gonna yank this thing out of here and see if we can get it all in the bucket. Okay. So if you guys are doing this at home, you gotta understand that it's a lot like changing the oil on your car. The transmission fluid is gonna make a mess, and just be prepared for that. Make sure you've got plenty of rags and things. And I wanna show you, I got this wiped off a little bit, what this tube looks like. When this tube is up in the transmission, it allows the fluid level to be this much higher than the drain, right? So that's why when we take the first plug out, very little comes out. Once we pull this tube out, it allows you to access the rest of the fluid that's in there, about this height across the bottom of the transmission. You notice on here as well, there is no pan to take off. So normally we would have on a regular car, it might be a transmission pan with a drain plug on it, maybe a fill plug. This doesn't have that at all. There is no filter to service in here. There's nothing else that we need to touch inside. So I've let this drain a little bit here until it's got a slow drip on it. That's going to get the majority of the fluid out that we're going to get out of it. I've cleaned up my tube here, the fluid check tube. This is where the socket goes. I don't know, can we see that? Okay, so the socket goes right in here. That's your 6mm. Now when we put this in, we want to be extremely careful. It tightens to something very light. I think it's somewhere around 15 inch-pounds, not foot-pounds, but inch-pounds. So I generally just run this in by hand, and then I'm just barely going to snug it up with my ratchet, especially this long ratchet that I'm going to use, because 15 inch-pounds is basically nothing. You know, it just needs to get in there snug enough where it doesn't back its way loose at all. And it is a piece of plastic, so definitely don't want to crack it by any means. If you have an inch-pound torque wrench, it would be something with a 1/4 inch drive on it and very light torque on it. So put it in by hand. Oh. And I'm just gonna snug this up very, very, very gently. Don't use a whole lot of leverage, okay? That's about it. So it's not going anywhere. We're gonna reinstall our drain plug here with the old gasket on it, because we've got to take it out again when we check the fluid level. So for now, we're going to put this in. We're not even going to torque it. We're just going to snug it up with our 10mm Allen style socket. Just snug it up. It's coming back out again. And then we're going to fill this over here. I'm going to show you the fill procedure. You're going to need some kind of a pump or something, or if you've got a funnel with a long hose on it at home, this will help you get the transmission fluid in. You don't necessarily need the tool that I have here. I'm just going to show you how I do it here in the garage, and you can pick your method when you get going. So here's the tool that I've got that we're going to use to pump the fluid back up into that hole. Now when we're working underneath the car, this makes it easy for us. We can just pressurize this canister after we've added our fluid to it, and then we can fill it until we want to stop, and then we just turn it off. So it's nice to have this tool. It's made by Mighty Vac. I don't care what kind of tool you use. Like I said, you can use a funnel with a long hose if you want. That'll get you in there. And I want to make sure you guys are using the right fluid. This vehicle calls for Toyota WS, their world standard transmission fluid. And you know, this is their particular blend for it. So there's other options out there. You can certainly go to a synthetic oil, and there's compatible products that you can probably put in here. I'm always a fan of just sticking with the manufacturer recommends most of the time. So you're certainly able to explore your options if you want, but Toyota WS is the correct fluid for this transmission. I'm going to put about 4 quarts of Toyota WS fluid in my tool here. This way we have enough to finish the service on it. It'll probably take somewhere between 3 and 4 quarts. I think the spec on it is 3.4 quarts. It's going to have to vary a little bit depending on your situation. So we'll start with about 3 quarts probably, and probably have to put a little bit more in there, but either way I like to have enough to get going. So like I told you guys before, it's really nice to have a tool like this. We do a lot of transmission servicing that requires this tool. There's a lot of different adapters. On here I've just got one that's basically a little elbow, like a 90-degree, and this actually hooks in the hole when we fill. There are some other cars where there's little adapters that thread into the pan, and you need that in order to fill it. The transmission fluid filling and servicing procedures have really gotten complicated over the years compared to what they were a couple of decades ago. I should also mention too, I talked a little bit about this Toyota WS fluid and using the correct fluids when you're servicing a transmission. Please make sure you're following your manufacturer's recommendations, because there's a lot of different fluids out there for transmissions, especially if you're working with a CVT transmission. That's not a conventional automatic transmission. It's a continuously variable transmission. It works completely different. It's got a belt and some sheaths on the interior of it, and they're problematic. And they definitely need the correct fluid in there at the correct level. Don't mix and match those with standard transmission fluid. But even if you see a transmission fluid like this that's pink in color, it doesn't mean that it's a typical Dextron, Mercon. It's probably something special, and you definitely want to make sure you're using the right stuff. So once we install this lid, it's going to kind of seal this container up. I've got a little shut-off valve on here, and I'm going to turn that off at 90 degrees. And then we can just pump this and pressurize this container. So it's got a little bit of a gauge on here, green and a red zone. So I usually pump this up to the top of the green, and this should give us enough pressure to get 3 quarts of fluid back into this transmission through that fill port that we have on the side of the transmission. And I'm going to show you here into our drain bucket the amount of pressure that actually comes out of here once I open this. I'm going to crack this open. You can control the pressure on it here, but you see it just kind of streams out. Nothing crazy. And we're going to start filling this a bit. We're filling now. Again, this can make a little bit of a mess here with some of this fluid, so I'm just going to try to hold it in place. See if we can get about 3 quarts of fluid in here. Now in the manual it'll give you an actual level, how much you're supposed to put in there, maybe 3.4 quarts or something. It really just depends on the type of service you've done according to the repair instructions. I haven't found that to be all that critical. I usually go about 3 quarts on these. If you overfill it a little, it's okay, because we're going to drain that back out. If you underfill it a little, that's okay too, because we've got 3 quarts in there and it's going to take something close to 3.5. So I find 3 quarts is a good starting place. And once we've got that in there, then we're going to show you how to do the level check on it. Now that we've got 3 quarts of fluid in this transmission, I've left the fill plug out. This way if we need to add some, we can. The drain plug is installed again, obviously. And we need to get this vehicle at the proper operating temperature. Not the vehicle so much, but specifically the transmission fluid. It needs to be between 95 degrees Fahrenheit and 113 degrees Fahrenheit. This is the operating range for the transmission fluid when you check the level. Not only does it have to be within that range, but it also has to be in idle control mode. So they don't want the engine idle coming up and down, surging or anything while you're checking the fluid, because we've got the vehicle running and the pump inside the transmission will obviously be circulating the fluid. So we want this to have a very precise level draining out of that overflow tube while we check the fluid. What we've done here to do this without a scan tool is to jump out the terminals inside the car. I'm going to put up a diagram for you guys so you can see which terminal specifically to jump on the OBD port. It's terminal 4 and terminal 13. And we're going to follow this procedure exactly. Once we start the vehicle up, We're going to move this shifter from park down into drive, slowly back to park, leaving a few seconds in each gear selection. Okay, once we've done that, then we're going to take this shifter, we're going to put it all the way down to drive, and we're going to go back and forth between neutral and drive. We're going to do this about a second in each. You need to be less than 1.5 seconds in each position. So down to drive, less than 1.5 seconds, back to neutral, back to drive, back to neutral, back to drive. We're going to repeat that process for at least 6 seconds. We may need a little bit more. I've seen this take a little bit up to 10 seconds on some vehicles, so we're just going to kind of rapidly move this shifter back and forth. And what we're looking for on the instrument cluster is the gear range indicator is going to illuminate for a couple of seconds. The drive, specifically the D letter, is going to illuminate on the dashboard for 2 seconds. After we get that drive light to illuminate, we're going to put it back in park, and that drive light on the instrument cluster is going to do one of 3 things. It's either going to go out, it's going to stay on steady, or it's going to start flashing. If it goes out, the transmission fluid temperature is below 95 degrees. If it comes on steady, the transmission fluid temperature is in the proper zone, that 95 to 113 degrees Fahrenheit. If it starts flashing, it's over 113 degrees Fahrenheit. So we can't check the fluid if the light is flashing. We can't check the fluid if the light is off. We're waiting for that D light to stay on steady after the initial 2-second illumination. I'm going to go ahead and get started, and hopefully we're successful in activating these 2 modes we need in order to check the transmission fluid level. I've already got the jumper installed between terminal 4 and terminal 13. We'll start the vehicle up, and then we're going to go for a few seconds in each gear selection all the way down to drive. Back to reverse. We're going to finish in park, and then we're going to move this gear selector Okay, so now the drive light is illuminated, and it's on steady, and it's letting us know where we've got the vehicle in park right now, but it's in drive on the instrument cluster. So that's letting us know that the fluid temperature is in the proper range. So we need to quickly get out here under the car and check this fluid level. Let's do it. We've got to pull this jumper wire out in order to get this in idle control mode. All right. All right, so we've removed that drain plug, and you notice there's not much coming out of here. We just had that initial splash on it. So we're gonna fill this some more until we get a small stream coming out. And then we're gonna let it sit there until we've got just a bit of a drip, no more stream, and we're gonna put the plug back in. Just want to mention, you see how this is kind of splattering out now? That's about what you want it to look like. And as soon as this slows down to a slow drip, we're ready to put this plug back in and wrap this level up. It's right where it needs to be. So like I told you before, I put about 3 quarts in here, and 3 quarts is usually enough. This is right about where we want to be. Like I said, I think the maximum capacity on there is about 3.4 quarts. So this is the proper level. We're going to cap this up here in just a second as soon as this stops dripping out. And then we're ready to install our fill plug and put the rest of this back together. Okay, you see how it's slowing down now? Just to kind of like a steady drip. This is about what we want it to look like here. Maybe a hair slower, right about there. I put my new drain plug gasket on. We've got this little slow drip going on, and that's about where you want it. And then we're going to put this plug in. Now I'm just going to snug this up for now. We'll torque that on after we get the vehicle shut off. But I want to put that in, and I want to put our fill plug back in. And now I want to lower the vehicle back down, shut it off, and we'll torque everything up, put all our covers back on. All right, we went inside, we turned the vehicle off, and we raised it back up in the air. Now I just want to come back and check my torque on this drain bolt. It's supposed to be at 37 foot-pounds. We'll get this one torqued up. Right there, 37. And then this other one here is not quite so important. Just snug it up. It's a fill plug. It's not going to leak or anything. The fluid level is way below where the fill plug is on this transmission. So you don't even need to worry about that one. I would just say snug it up, not too tight again, and definitely not loose, okay? I'd like to use a little bit of brake cleaner, just kind of clean up some of the leftover transmission fluid. I went in here and just wiped up a couple of the big spots that I dripped everywhere, and I'm just gonna make sure that when we're done here, we're gonna put a cover on it. We don't want stuff dripping in here for days. If you wanna spray around your drain plug too, that's usually a good idea. And then come back in here and wipe everything off. Last thing you want to do is leave some stains in your driveway, your garage, because you let transmission fluid leak into a cover or into the frame rail or something that you weren't able to get cleaned up. And we'll just kind of tidy up all these work areas here. And then we are ready to start installing all our covers again. We'll be reinstalling this side cover. This kind of goes in behind here, and then the two screws will line up to the holes back here. We'll get these started by hand. And then once they're in a couple of turns, we can run them in. We'll reinstall our clip. Okay, now we're ready to put this lower cover on. Just going to reverse the removal procedure. We got 4 bolts and a bunch of clips. And just make sure you're installing these bolts by hand. We don't want to cross thread these. You may have to wiggle this cover around a little to get everything lined up. Once you do, the bolt should fall right in the hole. Go ahead and get it in a couple of turns, and you're ready to snug that up too. Got the side cover on, the lower cover's installed, everything's torqued up nice, and we just got to put the wheel on last here, and we are ready to wrap this job up. Now that we've wrapped up this transmission service on this vehicle and demonstrated how to properly adjust the fluid level, I hope you guys learned a couple of things here. The process is not terribly difficult, although doing this on your back is really cumbersome. So if this is something you plan on tackling at home, just make sure you got a nice bundle of rags. I'm sure you see in this video that we made a little bit of a mess here. You definitely want to get that cleaned up when you're done. If your floor, you're using your garage and it's going to absorb some of this oil, make sure you got it covered up, because there's not really any easy way to do this without making a mess. And I don't want you guys to stain your garage floor or your driveway or something if you're trying this at home. Hopefully you've understood the procedure to get this thing into its fluid temperature detection mode and idle speed control mode. It's a little weird that they make you do this on this car. It's kind of a bit of a process, but that's what they want from the manufacturer. If you want to do it correctly, that's the way to do it. I hope you guys found this useful. If not going to try it yourself, at least you understand the procedure when you bring it into the garage and somebody's going to do this job for you. You understand what they've got to go through, and you know, probably why it's going to cost you a little more than the average job here when you're looking to do a basic transmission service. So hopefully it's at least informative for you. I hope you guys are enjoying this content. We've got a lot more coming for you. Go ahead and check out this next video we got coming up for you over here. We'll see you in the next one.